this Change Now session dedicated to democracy. My name is Kristen. I'm the former head of IT and innovation at the New York Times International, the founder of Sanxi. I help technology, help media and democracy. And I also work with many organizations supporting media and democracy. I'm an expert assessor for the Google News Initiative and sit on the boards of the Culture and Democracy Forum and the Youth and News Media Initiatives. Now, democracy. It's hard-earned and easily lost, and many around the world are fighting for it day and night and paying for it with their lives. Distrust and intolerance continue to challenge democracies. So at Change Now, we're asking, what can we do to ensure that democracy can not just survive, but also thrive? What can we do to strengthen democracies together? As individuals, as content consumers, as businesses, and as media organizations. To help us reflect on these questions and explore work that is already being done, we've got some great experts lined up. So let's dive straight in and welcome our first guest, Robyn Scott. Robyn, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So Robyn, let me introduce you properly. You are the co-founder and CEO of Apolitical. And you have been named one of Wired's 50 people about to change the world. You're a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, and your work and writing has been featured in the Financial Times, BBC, Forbes, Wired. Apolitical is a global learning platform for government founded in 2015. And I've got lots of questions for you about Apolitical. But if I understand correctly, you have lots of questions for our audience as well. Is that correct? OK, so
Absolutely.
We're going to work as a team here and do a quick poll of our audience. Robyn, go ahead with your first question.
So my first question for the audience is, how many of you think healthy democracies and healthy governments are critical to tackling our biggest challenges?
OK, so raise your hand if you believe that healthy democracies and governments. OK, I would say that there is a good 60% of the room that has put their hand up, Robyn.
60%. Oh, we want to close that gap, I think. Next question is, how many of you currently work in government?
OK, can you guys hear Robyn OK? Yeah, OK. So how many of you are currently working in government? Hands up. 0% of the room have put their hands up, Robyn.
Oh dear, I gathered there were some city folks today, but maybe they're not in this room. Another gap to close. Third question, how many of you have ever worked in government at some point?
OK, so does any, oh yeah, there's a couple of hands going up. I've maybe got 5 or 10 have had some government experience, yes.
5 or 10, and approximately how many people in the room?
Ooh, I'd say probably about, I don't know, 70, 80. I'm not very good at guesstimating.
Right. OK, so we're in the sort of 10%, sub 10% region. For those of you who haven't worked in government, how many of you would consider working in government at some point?
OK, we've got a good number of hands going up here. I'd say 30 to 40% of the room put their hands up there.
Fantastic. Well, ending on an optimistic note for the polls.
OK, and that's a great question to poll to the audience, actually, because, Robyn, your background's not in government. So what led you to start Apolitical?
Yes, and to be very clear, 10 years ago, I would have been in your shoes, not really thinking that much about government, certainly not planning to work in it. And I was led to government through a sort of slightly circuitous route, working on big problems in the world. And the problem where I saw the power of government most acutely was actually in South Africa. I'm from Southern Africa, and I set up a social enterprise teaching coding to prisoners and ex-offenders in some of the most dangerous prisons and townships in the country, which is a pretty dangerous country. So you can imagine how challenging these places are. And the work was incredibly rewarding. We were the second program in the world to do it after one in California. We were getting people into jobs. We were changing lives, bringing something so high-tech and future-leaning into a place that felt so backward. But the more time I spent with prisoners, the more frustrated I got, because for the most part, you are dealing with people who are not fundamentally bad, but who have been let down one way or another, and sometimes in many ways by policy. You therefore are putting bandages on wounds that should never have been inflicted in the first place. And I wanted to get upstream of these problems so that you have more leverage, so that you're not just constantly picking up the pieces of health policy, education policy, social policy, justice policy, leaving people so much worse off than they should be. So that attracted me to kind of look at government in the first place. I teamed up to found Apolitical with an American former public servant, and we began looking at the government space, which has been horrendously left behind by technology and product thinking. Government still operates sometimes on mostly on 20th century solutions and occasionally on 19th century solutions. And the numbers are extraordinary. The cost of this is extraordinary. And I'll just give one figure before I pause. And I have a few big figures I'd like to share. But one astonishing figure, which McKinsey calculated in 2017, is that if governments just did what was already working elsewhere in other places, this is status quo best practice, no innovation, it would save $3.5 trillion a year for society. Now, incidentally, I think end of last year or early this year, McKinsey did another calculation of the additional money we need to spend greening the economy, and it's 3.5 trillion. So the opportunity in government for creating additional value, cost savings, just dwarfs a lot of the sums of money that we're looking at in other sectors and other channels. So you may love government, you may hate government, you may be somewhere in the middle, but if you care about solving the big global problems that you've all been talking about at this gathering, you have to bring government to the table.
Now, Robyn, actually, I'm having a little trouble hearing you because there's a lot of background noise, so I'm not sure if the stagehands can turn up the sound a little. But did you say $3.5 trillion?
$1 trillion a year. So okay. That is savings to be had through doing what's working in other places, doing what we know to work.
Okay, so for those of you who, we just said we didn't hear, we heard that there are not many people in government in the audience, but for everyone that's hearing this, go and speak to your government representatives. These are the kind of changes that we can bring in.
Or go join government, even better, join it.
Or even better, join it, and I think that, in fact, Robyn has some, will tell us a bit more about that. If we can get the sound up on Robyn a little bit higher so that I can hear her, that would be great. So Apolitical also has a non-profit arm focused on improving political leadership, I believe. Can you tell us about the thinking of creating this?
Sure. So let me just first of all step back and tell you what Apolitical is in concrete terms. We're a learning platform for government, now used by more than 170,000 public servants in 160 different countries. Any public servant anywhere in the world can sign up for free to use Apolitical to share best practice, common challenges. And then we have online courses on 21st century topics in government, from climate change to digital, delivered by leading universities such as Oxford University. We have a collaboration with a department there on a number of courses on climate, Georgetown on technology. So that's Apolitical, and we're very focused on the vast civil service, which is more than 200 million public servants around the world, and that's not counting the wider public service. So it's a very, very large workforce. But the more we started to look at how do you make government effective in the 21st century, how do you empower that workforce, the more we stepped back and took a very systems view of democracy. And the way we have come to approach the democracy system is what we call the democracy flywheel. Now, I'm sure most of you know what a flywheel is, but essentially it's a self-reinforcing loop where each component, if improved, improves the other. So it's a virtuous cycle. It can also be a vicious cycle, though, if one component or more components fail. Now, if you think about the components of democracy, you've got citizens participating in free and fair elections because they believe that elections can affect change. So that's component one. Those citizens are electing politicians who are ethical and will be true to the manifestos they run on. That's two. And component three is those politicians are working with civil services to shape and deliver on policies for citizens. Now, if that loop works, then you've got citizens trusting in government more, participating in politics more, and the flywheel improves. Our company works at the civil service level. We're B Corporation, but we then set up a nonprofit foundation to work on elected officials, which is a much smaller group, but an extremely powerful group. So there are about 6 million elected politicians globally compared to the more than 200 million in the civil service. And the number of parliamentarians can fit in a football stadium, all of them globally. But those people have enormous power. And what our foundation does is works on supporting young and traditionally excluded groups to run for political office across the political spectrum. And we have programs from South Africa to Sweden to Paraguay doing that. So we get more courageous 21st century politicians running for office, the kind of leaders that we want to believe in. So we are working there on two parts of the democracy flywheel. And ultimately, we want to get to citizen engagement and education. It's worth saying that that flywheel also only works, and I know this is going to echo themes in the conference today, if you're in an environment where truth is not a matter of opinion. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately now, truth is often a matter of opinion, and that is hurting democracy to a very high degree.
So what I'm understanding from this also is that this is kind of not just a flywheel effect, but you're trying to open up the funnel of the number of people that are coming through from the citizens through to elected officials and then into the government also.
Exactly. The pipeline, the pipeline is terrible, and this is why I did the polling. If you go 3-4 decades back, government used to be seen as a place for purpose, a place for the most talented people to effect change. That has shifted massively, and it shifted a lot, not because of substance, but because of optics. The narrative around government as a force for good has been trashed, and we have to change that. We have to get better people into politics. Look around the world at the bright spots of the leaders that we all admire, and see the difference that a few people can make. So we are obsessed with that pipeline, the pipeline into elected office, the pipeline into the civil service. And just to give another number on political leaders. So on the African continent, which is the youngest continent in the world, the median age is about 25. There are around 230 MPs under the age of 30. So to double that number, all you'd have to do is add another 230. It is insane that the youngest continent in the world is being represented by what is now mainly old men. So that needs to change. Democracy doesn't work when representation is so distorted.
I think that's quite right. And in fact, even myself, I often see working with brilliant young people or even activists, they reach these very high level statuses and have large followings, but then the prospect of them moving across into government it's not territory they'd ever go to. So I love that you're focused on that point just right there, and increasing the volume, the funnel coming through. But how about the people that are already there then? Based on what you've seen, what is it that you can do to actually help change the mindset of those that are already in those political positions?
There are a few interventions. So we're particularly interested in the intersection of skills and culture. How can you support often unsupported public servants in these really difficult topics they're all facing? How do you respond to COVID? How do you run a country digitally? How do you respond to climate change? So supporting them with knowledge, skills, and community. And one of the wonderful things about working in government is most people are pretty purpose-driven. You hear a lot of criticism about the people in government, that they're citizens like you and I. They have kids, they're stuck in traffic, they're worried about their taxes. Mostly they've forgone larger salaries to go into government. And they really care about making a difference. So we are building that community of purpose. And one of my favorite all-time responses from a member was a Canadian policymaker who wrote to us and said, in an era of democratic recession, Apolitical is like Prozac for us depressed policymakers. And I'm really proud to be the Prozac. I don't underestimate its importance. But then also, how do you get the hard technical skills? And I mentioned climate at the beginning. A great example is sustainable finance. We need a lot more political action on climate, obviously, but one of the big bottlenecks in government now is not just the political action, it's how do we spend the money we've agreed to spend well? So we co-created a course with the Smith School at Oxford University on how to do sustainable finance well in government. That's now being used by public servants in 60 countries from the UK to Mongolia. So supporting with skills like that, we've just launched a course on net zero. We're also looking at topics such as the intersection between climate and mental health, climate and equity. One of the most interesting things about working with government is the opportunity for win-wins if you can find ways of policies that have kind of double or triple bottom lines and benefit across multiple verticals in government. So we look a lot at those. And I keep mentioning climate. I think we should all be mentioning climate. It's everyone's problem, it's everyone's opportunity, but it's a especially big focus of ours at Apolitical. You've got trillions of dollars about to be spent greening the economy. But the government workforces, from multilateral right the way down to local government, are not skillful for the most part on how to do that. And the difference between government being skillful and not being skillful is the difference between much of that money being wasted to extraordinarily high returns on that money. So we think that there is a crisis in government green skills, and we are obsessed with closing it.
I'm very happy to hear that because, I mean, even if we just look at this week, we have seen the impacts of climate crisis in India and Pakistan. It's been 46 degrees this week. It's very difficult to work, drive your economy, or even function as a human being in those kind of circumstances. What do you believe, very quickly, we have a minute left, needs to radically change in governments in order for us to see climate crisis put at the core of political agendas?
People who care about it need to go into government, but we also need to work with what we've got. And that means changing the media narrative in government. It means showing up for elections. You may think governments suck, and they often do, but it is still better to participate. It's still better to shift things a little bit because of the power of government. And it means if you're in the nonprofit sector, if you're in the corporate sector, work with government more, because government just has, again, love it or hate it, so much power. So democracy is like a family. There are lots of parts of it you hate, but you're stuck with it. We have to participate.
So show up for democracy, be it in terms of voting or actually participating in your government in some way, shape, or form. And if you'd like to do that, many of you raised your hands here when Robyn asked if you'd like to get involved in government. So definitely check out Apolitical. And Robyn, thank you very much for being with us here today at ChangeNOW.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. So as you've just heard from Robyn, we are all responsible not just for keeping democracy alive, but also for protecting it. In fact, most of the time, democracy, in fact, getting involved only feels like when we go to vote, maybe once every 4 or 5 years. And yet we need to be protecting it and helping it thrive on a daily basis. There are many actors on the democratic stage, or maybe should I say in the agora. There are politicians, there are lobbyists, and of course we have the fourth estate. This is the term that's given to refer to media and the press and their explicit capacity to advocate in the political framework on political issues. So next up, talking about how we can heal democracy, we have 4 very diverse and expert speakers from the media ecosystem. We're going to be looking at the role in media in healing democracy from the perspectives of large media organizations, startups, and those on the front line of journalism and democracy. So please welcome Romano, co-founder, CEO of the Newsroom, Pierre, Louette, CEO of Groupe Les Echos, Le Parisien, come on up here. Daryna Shevchenko, CEO from the Kyiv Independent. Hi there. Hey, Pierre, welcome. Daryna, hey, come on up. And right behind her, we have Jakub Parusinski. Jakub, you're the co-founder of The Fix. Hi. It is fantastic to have these representatives and even defenders of democracy here on stage with me today. Let me just introduce each of them properly so you know who we're talking with. Jenny, you're the co-founder and CEO of the Newsroom, Romano, and you're on a mission to fight misinformation online. Jenny and your co-founder, Pedro, spent years brainstorming about journalism and polarization whilst working in technology. That's your background. And then in 2020, you decided that it was time to act. This is when you created the Newsroom. The Newsroom was born to revolutionize news reading through bite-sized news, historical context, and diversity of thought. And you've come here today from Italy, correct?
Portugal.
I beg your pardon, Portugal. I get it right.
I'm Italian, it's half true.
OK. Pierre Louette, CEO, Groupe Les Echos, Le Parisien, media arm of LVMH Group, comprising of news, press, TV, radio organizations, including Les Echos and Le Parisien. You have a background in media and finance, and you've also held positions at Orange and Agence France Presse. Welcome. Daryna Shevchenko, you're the CEO of the Kyiv Independent, and you've joined us here today from Kyiv. I know that you took a long and tortuous journey to get here to be with us, so thank you. You're the CEO... Yeah, she deserves a round of applause. You are the CEO of the Kyiv Independent, an English-language publication created by journalists fired from the Kyiv Post. You have 10 years' experience as a media manager, trainer, and consultant. You've been the executive director of a media development NGO. You've run investigative media journalism development and departments on TV and worked as a producer. And you joined Jnomics as a media consultant and a partner.
That's right, thank you.
All right, and up here also we have Jakub. Jakub, you're the managing partner of Jnomics Media, a consultancy that helps media develop more sustainable business models. You're also the co-founder of The Fix, a media industry publication and research center aimed at improving the knowledge and data of those available to media managers and investors. As you can see, we have a very distinguished panel, and Daryna, I'm going to come to you first, just so that you can share some background with the audience about how the Kyiv Independent came to be and what it looks like now today in its very short lifespan.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today, and Heroyam Slava, whoever said that, I'm with you. Kyiv Independent Stories is a lengthy one, but it's not even how, it's more of when it came to be. And it came to be basically in the mid-November of 2021. So when the war started and the Kyiv Independent became ultimately the voice of Ukraine, we were just 4 months old. And whoever works in the media or any company for that matter understands that 4 months old for a company is a very short time. But we managed. So in November, the Kyiv Post owner, Adnan Kivan, and Kyiv Post was the legacy paper, the only English language news outlet in Ukraine, the only independent one, at least. KP was there for 26 years. And at some point, the last owner decided he didn't want the editorial independence, and he didn't agree with the understanding of the editorial team for what editorial independence stands for. So he fired the whole staff on November 8th, and the editorial team of the Kyiv Post decided to move on. I was then part of Jnomics media, and still am. Basically, Jnomics reached out to the Kyiv Post editorial team, and we co-founded the Kyiv Independent. That's how the Kyiv Independent came to be. We knew we had to work very fast because, on December 25, the Western world, that is our audience, goes on a long break. So we had to be, to move fast. And that's what we did. We launched a daily newsletter, Ukraine Daily. Probably you are subscribed to it. If not, please do subscribe. It's on our website. It's all the news in your inbox every day, still doing it. We had a podcast about how we've been creating this media. The last episode is coming actually out very soon. And we launched a website on December 6th. And that's how basically by then we already had a Patreon page set up, a crowdfunding campaign set up. We asked our readers for help. And when the war started, we already had everything set up, even though it was a very early stage. But we managed, and we are grateful to be here for Ukraine. It's a big responsibility though, but we understand that this is the front line we are fighting.
So in a very short space of time, you've actually spun up an entire news organization. Can you tell us just how many readers, followers do you have today in your short lifespan already?
Well, we had 3 million unique users in March. Now, I think in April it was around 2-something unique users. We had 11 million sessions on the website in March. We have over 2 million followers on Twitter. On day one of the war, we set up Telegram and Instagram. They were very new. Now they are between 50 and 60,000 followers, each of them. Those of you who try to set up new Instagram and Telegram accounts know that actually goes very slowly, and but we managed. That's about it.
Wonderful, thank you. I can see we can demonstrate through those numbers also the need for information at times like this. And in fact, what is a phrase that's often used to describe the time that we're living in is vaka. That is times of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Pierre, I think this very much describes the environment that we all live in today, whether we're in Ukraine or in France. Large media organizations like Groupe Les Echos, we have a responsibility to support citizens in these uncertain times. I know that you've got a strategy. You've put into place a strategy to help you do this. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yes, well, thank you. First of all, I would like to express my admiration for what you do, because it's a bit different to be working for democracy in a country which is also fighting for its freedom. Than speaking about democracy in other countries where, fortunately, we have less aggressive neighbors or regimes in the neighborhood. So, yeah, really, a lot of support for you and admiration for what you do. When it comes to our democracies, here, one of the main issues we have is really to continue doing something we've been thriving, trying to do for many years now, which is bring the elements of a public debate to the table, share them, check them many times, and also be in interaction with our readers. So this is something that we've decided to do 3 or 4 years ago now, adding a new dimension to our mission, which is trying to get the people, and it's very relevant with this change now today, trying to get the people to have more information about our planet, the changes it incurs, and also giving them points of interaction, giving them ways to interact, to be part of the solution, and not just describing a huge problem we have. So this has been, an addition to what we were traditionally doing with the economic newspaper, we have Les Echos. Okay, they bring the best possible information, to all the business community here. Le Parisien is a very good general information news service. We have millions of readers, but we added this. We added this because we felt it was one of our missions, to really be a force of proposition with that new problem that we all have to face.
Okay, so you've taken what you've already been doing for decades, if not hundreds of years, and now added in evolving and changing your industry from the inside as such to react to what citizens need today.
Yeah, exactly. We decided that it was not just a matter of reflecting a growing preoccupation. It was also the essence of the game was to give more information, give tools, give access to ways to measure things, and also it had an internal dimension in some ways because our staff, we have about 700 journalists in the group and more than 1,000 people, and they had opportunities to do something for the planet at home, but not at work. So we decided to bring more of that to work, and also to direct, to put in the good direction a lot of coverages by adding something related to the planet and also to corporate and social responsibility. I've decided also that we needed to develop more and more diversity. Something was said just a minute ago about the distortion, between the representation of the MPs in Africa with the population. It was a question there of age. For us, it's really more and more a question of who are the people writing about the diversity. If they do not reflect that diversity, it's a bit of an issue. So we've decided, first of all, to work on parity, getting to this position in which the women have an equal position. They were more numerous in the newsroom, but very less numerous when it came to positions of direction.
Okay.
So we changed that. We brought equality there. And we also decided to work on the Parisien, working on something which is very interesting, is the way to measure parity in what you write. Also, how many times will you see a man expert, intervening and talking about something, maybe something he's not really an expert of, actually, but they will never refuse to talk. And you have less ladies
I see some smiles on the stage and no doubt some smiles in the audience.
So it always happens. So now we've decided that every journalist has to check, when I call an expert, could I call an expert, a lady expert? Is it possible? Can I find her? And not be stopped by her saying, okay, I'm not an expert, I don't have time. No. You are probably just as an expert as your male colleague is.
It's certainly bringing more voices, diverse voices into media, and the production of media is essential. Thank you for that. That's actually a beautiful segue to Jenny here, because diversity of voices is something that's core to the strategy of what you're doing at the Newsroom as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your strategy is based on, the plurality?
Yes. So the core of our mission is very much promoting plurality within the media. And plurality is as difficult a word as difficult a concept to achieve. And what we are working to do is to bring different perspectives in terms of any news event you read about. And so we recently launched a mobile application, and the objective of that is to let you discover the news in a way that is bite-sized in the beginning, but then exposes you to different points of view. And what our technology does is, in a nutshell, aggregating information on the basis of the opinion spectrum and lets you understand what is the common ground in terms of what everyone is talking about and what we can mostly agree on, and what are the differences and what are the different arguments being brought. This comes from the current situation, which is very much the opposite. So we end up being in our filter bubbles, and we build our ivory towers, and we roll our eyes anytime somebody thinks differently from us. So if I read X, I'm good. If you read Y, you're not good, and I just avoid you, either because I decide so or because an algorithm says so. And so we are trying to do the opposite there. So trying to bring people together, stimulating debates, because without debate, there's no democracy, and you don't have debate if you don't have diversity of opinions. And so that's the objective.
Definitely, without debate, we don't have democracy. That's, I think, core and fundamental to what we're talking about here today. Jakub, I want to come to you now that I know that you've worked with Daryna also on the Kyiv Independent. We've seen businesses and people come together to support Ukraine in a way that nothing else has ever united us like this. But what can businesses do to support media, news organization, and journalists when democracy is under threat?
Thank you very much for that question. Just to start, let me maybe take a slight step back and just highlight how important really media is for a functioning democracy and for a functioning society. So no matter how good your efforts are, no matter how much capital you have, and how much you want to change the world, whether it's building sustainable cities, a greener economy, or whatever, almost everything that you can do can be undone with 50,000 euros in disinfo and PR campaigns, and you will lose years because of this. We've seen dysfunctional media systems, manipulated media systems, change governments, change heads of state, destroy industries, build phony industries. So the power here, what is at stake is absolutely critical. And when we look at what are the different stakeholders doing, you know, it's a little bit scary. So, you know, when we look at, so for example, had a meeting with OECD recently, 0.2% of development assistance goes to media, right? 0.2%. In terms of how we are thinking about the media industry, it's like the green movement in the 1980s. We are just starting to think about, you know, well, what is a magic bullet? Do you do this or do you do that? No, there's 50 different things that you need to do, and you need to innovate along the way, and you need to work with a whole range of stakeholders in tech, in government, in business. But what I think is really important here is just highlight how much responsibility there is on different levels. On the responsibility on the level of companies. We have a fair trade movement for coffee. How about the fair trade movement for media that you advertise in, right? Are we actually looking at who we're giving this money to? It's also about personal responsibility of people. I mean, I'm not going to ask everyone to raise hands, but I would guess that if you actually had to measure the amount of time you spend in a day picking out the place that you're going to eat at night for dinner, and how much you spend in a week or a month thinking about your media diet, what you read and what you consume, I don't know who wins. I think it's the evening restaurant who wins more often than not, right? How much time and how much money and how much actual innovation are we putting behind solving these problems? Because, I mean, let me just be clear. All the other panels and sections and everything else here is so important, but it can all be undone, and it all requires the media system to also be fixed before making a real impact.
Mm-hmm. You said that you weren't going to ask the audience to raise their hands. I am going to ask the audience to raise their hands. Okay, get ready for this one. No, because I think what Jakub has just said is fundamental to the survival and the health, the well-being of the media, and therefore democracy. So here's a controversial question for you. Raise your hands if you believe that Elon Musk buying Twitter is good for democracy. All right. I'd say maybe 0.5% of the audience have put their hands up. Okay. Certainly, businesses and technology have a role, and we can see how much our sources of information are under threat. As Jakub said, many of us do spend more time researching the restaurant for this evening's meal, or maybe where we're going to go on vacation, than the sources of our information and who's funding them. Thinking about also Twitter, our habits today, we scroll, we doom scroll, okay? But we want to be able to unpack the complexity of what's going on better. And yet we have all these bad habits as consumers. How can we help consumers overcome these habits? Do you have anything that you've seen that you're working on at the moment? Pierre, I see you're nodding.
Yeah. We have a preoccupation now, and we try to develop a lot what is called media education. It seems so simple, it seems so silly, but if you look at the programs of someone going to college here, to university. But let's start with college and school. There is almost not 1 hour dedicated to something kids and young people are going to spend hours on, not 1 hour dedicated to education, to media. How are you going to, cross-reference or not take everything for granted or try to look behind the screen? So this is being introduced now. It has recently started being introduced in the programs, but we feel it should be much more. So we decided to create an association with about 300 large regional, national newspapers here, which is called Association for Media Education. And we try to work closely with the government in order to have a week dedicated to media analysis, people, journalists intervening in the classroom. And I think this is really, like the basic point that you want to start with. Otherwise, as you were mentioning, people are going to be spending hours on something with no real background information, with no capacity. Another thing which I think media education can help us with is something you addressed, which is extremely strong and true, which is the filters and the cognitive bubbles in which we live. And this has a lot to do with the social networks and the algorithms that are the basis of their success and also their development. But you need to learn about that. What is the programmation? What is inside? And again, how can you not always be with people that think exactly like you? Because this is antagonistic to democracy. You need to confront yourself with others. You need to exchange ideas. The exchange creates the value. Being just with yourself is not great. And that would be my final word when it comes to Elon Musk and Twitter. I think history tells us that major ego trips are not always going in the good direction. That would be my hint to that.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good hint. We've had a few examples that we can look at. What about the rest of you, though? I want to stay on the subject of educating our consumers so that the youth as such can become better news consumers and therefore more active in democracy. Do you have other examples?
I have, I've thought a lot about it, so I actually want to ask the audience the question. How many of you guys actually work in media or worked in media? Please raise your hands. Okay, it's not so many, but those of you who did, you know that everybody knows how journalists should do their work. Like, there's always a commentator saying like, no, you are wrong. The story is written in a wrong way. It's a wrong approach. You should have gone for a podcast, not a Twitter post, not a story. There's always a debate around how journalists should be, doing what they're doing. And, and God forbid, a journalist makes a mistake. Like, a person makes a mistake, oh my God, that's not going to be forgiven, like, ever. That, there will be this stamp of hate on this media outlet forever, especially if they admit they made a mistake, which is weird. So, apparently, everybody, the consumers of the media actually believe that they know what they're doing, and they know how journalists should do their work better. And, it seems like there is a huge gap between the journalists who are actually people, and the consumers who are also people, surprisingly. And it's somehow they don't meet. And I think that one of the solutions and approaches I saw working is journalists meeting their consumers, meeting their audiences. In Ukraine, a few years ago, this whole movement started. So all the music festivals and film festivals and whatever folk festivals had a section for media literacy. They would invite media organizations to have stands there, and people would just come and talk to journalists. And a lot of people discovered, surprisingly for themselves, that they don't know much about journalists or actually what's going on in the country, or they've been mistaking about this and that. There were different contests and, they would get prizes and stuff like that. But I think the bottom line of it is people hate people less when they meet each other. And I think the idea is to kind of close this gap between the journalists, that is some evil-minded people sitting behind the screens of the TVs and websites, but they are also people who just doing their job, and their job is to deliver the information to you, and your job is to take this information and digest it in a way that it serves you well. Mm-hmm. And once this gap is closed, I'm not sure that the festivals is the only way to do it. Probably there are more ways to do it, But I think, this is something we really need to work on closing this gap and moving journalists closer to the world, to the consumers.
I think it's quite interesting what you've said and shared, because effectively, we put journalists on this pedestal where they're either lauded or shot down at, and yet there's no tolerance for mistakes there. As Jakub, you were saying earlier about media being in a glass house, effectively. Yeah. Have you seen any examples of great efforts or initiatives to help close that gap, effectively, between the readers, the journalists, and therefore help youth readers?
So I think that's actually a really interesting idea, and to some extent, I think this is what is the basis of the success of various, what I would say is creator journalists who do these live streams via Twitch or TikTok or whatever, and they can kind of interact on a larger scale than sort of the in-person meeting. But I think there's a big effort to be made on education. By the way, maybe more schools should have school papers. I didn't think about it, but
we love this idea.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Right? Companies can also have company papers, right?
Maybe the children from the schools could report on the companies.
That would be great. Yeah, bring your kid to work, except that they're going to do a profile.
An investigative piece on your accounting department.
Exactly, yeah. Or who microwaved the fish. But I think also there's a lot to be done on the education side. I think what's also happening, there's this example in Finland, which is quite interesting. It's called Troll Factory. I do recommend you to check it out if you don't know it. Basically, kids get to play the role of being the manager of a troll factory, creating disinfo campaigns and black PR against their enemies. And media literacy tends to work really well, and people start to get a distance, and they become more conscious consumers.
Definitely. We've focused on youth education. We don't have time to go into it right now, but we know, in fact, the data shows that those that share misinformation, fake news, disinformation online the most are the older generation. Are there any particular initiatives? Pierre, does your initiative also address the older generation in helping them understand how to not spread fake news, how to identify misinformation and disinformation? Now, we've just got 3 and something minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you the same question to respond to. Beyond cash or investment, okay, what is it that you need the most in order to help you support media and democracy? Jenny.
So I think people, on the one hand, talents starting to work more and more at the crossroads between media and technology. I know I'm the tech person with that point of view, but I think the two can cooperate a lot, and people can actually have an impact here. And people more broadly, because we don't talk about the issues that are they're specific for the media enough. As Jakub was saying, anything that we're talking about here can be very much undone with the media. And so we need to have more attention, more effort, and more awareness and willingness to act collectively on the media, on making it more sustainable and more positively impactful for everyone.
Okay, so Jenny needs more people and more collaboration. Pierre?
Yeah, I would go in the same direction. More education, more awareness of the chances we have, and also of the dangers that can be witnessed. More critical analysis, taking a look at things and trying to cross-reference, trying to not be just in front of something, and also, of course, no naivety. You need to be less naive. You need to be, critical, but not in a bad mood, but always wondering if this is brought to you because it's completely true. Where does it come from? What is the origin of that? And again, I think our Ukrainian colleague and friend knows all about disinformation and people trying to produce an effect by producing fake informations. So the means and the technical means are now huge that allow to do this, and we thus need to be more aware.
Effectively, we've put into place many of the technical checks, but it's the education and the ability to be critically aware of what it is we're consuming. Thank you. Daryna.
Well, I'll go for very practical things. So one thing is that we need finally the big media distribution platforms to step up and do whatever it's needed to promote and lift independent media content. And I mean Facebook, Google, other social media platforms. And if what it takes is to change the algorithm and it's a huge investment, then it should be done. I mean, look at Ukraine and look at the power of information. If you don't want to be put in that position, I mean, you have to do it. You have to give a lift to the independent media. That's one thing. Another thing is, I think what media need is partnerships. And by partnerships, I don't mean just a signed memorandum, but like a commitment to do something together. Media are most vulnerable at the startup phase. When you have an idea, a mission, 10 people, oh my God, I was like, somebody has 700 journalists, I have 25, 20. And when you're a startup, you have probably 10 and an idea. And if at that point you can make partnership with a tech company who will take care, and by take care, I mean like really take care of your development, develop a website, upgrade it, work on it, protect it until you need it. That's very helpful. We have a partner like that in Ukraine, a media development company, IT development company that is helping the Kyiv Independent, and they're still with us. It's pro bono. It's a lot of help. We wouldn't do it without them.
Partners to support these new
partners
media
to support the
organizations.
new independent media, or like the independent media in crisis or whatever.
Okay.
And the third thing is actually we need attention, and I'm not asking for attention for like the Kyiv Independent, but we need attention for Ukraine. I know that I've been listening to people talking about climate and equity and stuff, and I understand how far we are from these discussions. What we are fighting for is for survival. And unless you guys give us your attention, unless you keep talking about Ukraine, we just won't survive. So we need attention. It can be through the Kyiv Independent or through any other media, but we need you to focus on Ukraine, talk about the war in Ukraine, because this is what our life is now. Thank you.
And indeed, democracy also. Jakub.
I'm not going to repeat. I think I agree with everything that's been said. The only thing I will add is we need bold innovators and partners to work together to make the media revolution as successful as the green revolution is currently. It takes nerves of steel to work in media, even in normal times, not even talking about the situation that Daryna has with the Kyiv Independent. But if you're up for a challenge, bringing cash is not a bad idea either. Yeah, let's work together. There's a lot of energy and there's a lot of opportunity to do good.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being with us here today, for helping us explore how we can support media, and in doing so, how we can support democracy. It's been a pleasure having you here, Jenny, Pierre, Daryna, and Jakub. Thank you all so much. I hope that our discussion, especially here at the end, has helped illustrate to you all not just the important role that media plays in supporting democracy, but how each of us can also help support the media. Now, I want to introduce you to someone who is training civic leaders of tomorrow. Is Alice here? Oh, she's right here. Alice, welcome. I didn't see you coming from this side. Please welcome Alice Barbe. Great to see you again. Hey, Alice. Wait for the music. I want people to be able to hear what it is that you do.
Hello. No, it doesn't.
Okay, they'll turn your mic on. Alice, you're the president of the Academy for Future Leaders. You support civic leaders who have demonstrated a strong track record in fighting for climate, social, and democratic justice. You started the Academy in January as a new kind of school.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hand right over to you now so that you can tell us more about it. Thank you.
Thank you. It still doesn't work? Yes, it works? No, it doesn't work.
It does work.
It does work. Okay.
I believe so.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. Wow, it's
Can you hear Alice?
Yes.
You can hear me, Alice?
Yes. Great. Thank you. So I'm here to talk about healing democracy in a country in which last month Marine Le Pen reached 42% of votes in the presidential elections. If you don't know Marine Le Pen, she's a candidate who inherited from a political party that is considering that concentration camps are a detail in history. She's a candidate that considers we should allocate rights to people according to where they're born or their religions. And the program that she's been carrying, as you can guess, has been fueled with hate speech and disinformation. Those 42% of people who voted for Marine Le Pen, let me tell you something about them. They are French as well. They feel French. They love their country, maybe a little bit more than I do, but they also feel disrespected. They feel that they are left behind by a system, and they're angry, and they don't feel considered. And on the other hand, we are witnessing a tremendous movement of people that are fighting for climate, that are mobilizing for Ukraine, that are taking the street everywhere in Europe, on the planet as well, galvanized by new ways of mobilizations. They feel they need to play a role to answer our biggest democratic challenge, but also the 21st century challenges: climate, racism, inequalities, you name it. They feel injustice in their bones because they've been fighting the good fight on ground. They know what they're talking about, but they don't feel taken into consideration as well. I'm going to give you some numbers. 81% of Europeans say they don't trust political parties. In France, 83% of us believes democracy is in danger. And 89% of French people are convinced that the debate, the political debate, is becoming more and more aggressive, and they feel a lot of distrust toward politics. And I'm sure, I'm not going to ask you to raise hands, but I'm sure you as well. You feel this tension rising. So there is a context of generalized discontent, and it's actually challenging the very basic values of this country and of Europe. And when those principles of democracy are being challenged, that leaves a lot of room for populists and right-wing nationalists to rise and gain more votes. And that fills a lot of space for citizens to feel disconnected from political power and from their representatives. Adding to that, disinformation, police brutality, hate speech, all of that is determining the rule of law. And we are living in those very, very difficult times. With the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Europe and humanity are facing unprecedented challenges that demand unity and a common vision, and blah, and blah, and blah. We feel that we keep asking for it. We feel that we keep asking for a better and a good leadership. Because to me, leadership, that doesn't mean governing. That means serving. We need elected representatives that actually serve their countries, that are showing the way and the example. And all of those bad things I said about the state of the planet, yes, we are in crisis, but yet I prefer to see the half-full glass. I have been an activist for the past 10 years. I have co-founded an organization called Singa, along with my co-founder Guillaume, who's here, who is currently launching an investment fund in Europe on migration-led innovation. We have if you have money to invest in the investment fund, please let him know. With Singa, we've been fighting for innovation on migration. That means what? That means welcoming refugees in a way that is showing dignity. We have created hosting platforms across Europe. We have created incubators in Europe and North America to support newcomers that are innovating with all their experience. I've been involved in a lot of movement, climate, women, and I've met extraordinary people along the way that have been fighting this fight with me. And in 2018, I've been called by the Obama Foundation that asked me to spend a year in New York with Barack Obama and his team and to learn from him. I mean, that was great. I'm not going to lie. But the best part of this year in the United States was not to be with the president. It was to be with fellow leaders, fellow civic leaders from India, from Tunisia, that have taken part in massive struggles. And having them by my side, I thought, oh my God, these are the people I want to see in politics. Those are the people that are demanding accountability, that are ethical, and that lead with integrity. Those people who work so hard for our societies to be better, people or groups like mine, like Guillaume, like you, that are innovating in the public space and engaging marginalized people to power. And it's obvious there is a growing, but yet demand for, unrecognized demand for participation beyond election. We keep asking for it, but we don't see it coming. So for all those reasons, I've recently launched this Academy for Future Leaders with the idea of supporting all those great people fighting for social justice, climate justice, and a better democracy so that they enter politics, either by running for elections or as thinkers by joining a party. We always think that we are not legitimate, that we are not credible enough to enter politics. And I've co-founded this organization with a partner called Mishka, who is French but now lives in New York, who told me, you know, I left to the United States because I didn't go to Sciences Po or l'ENA. And I knew that in the US maybe it would be easier. Because in France we have this feeling that we need to go to Sciences Po or l'ENA to enter politics and to have the legitimacy of playing a role. But that's not true. So we started to support 13 civic leaders. And all of them, they've never known anything but crisis. But at least for them, for me, for my team, all this feeling of going through crisis has given us something great, determination. So we managed to gather a community of teachers, politicians, coaches, about 80 people who are part of the community of the Académie, supporting the participants pro bono. People who were prime ministers, heads of state, professors at those Sciences Po, l'ENA, or Columbia University that we're talking about. Because all of us, we demand change. We want to train future elected leaders. We want to help them to be rooted in their communities. We want people to see themselves reflected in the political power. And we want to feel heard and represented. We want new political leaders to emerge with the skills and the support to make a difference. And I can tell you a bit about the people we support. People like Sana. Sana is a woman, 40 years old, 3 kids. She's running for parliament near the city of Cergy, in the suburb of Paris. As a Muslim woman, she has witnessed the injustice, the racism of how France has left behind what we call les quartiers, the suburbs. And that's not our first campaign. She was running as well for municipal elections. She has witnessed in her turn the past 20 years the same old white guy being elected, showing up in the neighborhood and the community only to take pictures and then back to their ivory towers. She's been on ground for all those years, helping the people. You cannot walk in Cergy with Sana without having all the city coming to say hi. She is the future of politics, but I wonder why she's not the present of it. There are also people like Priscilla. She initiated a petition to protest against the rise of the price for the gas, a petition that soon became viral and gathered millions of signatures. And this petition has given birth to a tiny movement you might have heard of called the Yellow Jackets, les Gilets jaunes. Priscilla became the spokesperson of the movement, and she had to face severe criticism, bullying, and cyber harassment for that. But she transformed all the energy into impact. And after the movement, she took part in many democratic movements, including la Convention citoyenne pour le climat, the Climate Civic Convention. There are so many other people like Stéphane. Stéphane is 54 years old. He's a baker. His job for the past 30 years was to make croissants. But one day he wanted to protest against the fact that the government wanted to deport his apprentice because he was illegally in France. So Stéphane decided to go on hunger strike. during 11 days. Because we live today in a country in which you cannot hire talented people, and you have to risk your life as an employer to hire your people and to protect your people. So after this hunger strike, he decided to run for a legislative election and is now running in Besançon, his city. These people that I call incredible people, they're people like you and me. They just had some courage. They just had some determination. They were left with no other choice. They already have an incredible impact. They know that leadership, as I was saying, is not governing, but serving. And they are the people I want to see in politics. And I'm sure you as well, I hope. So what are we doing with the Academy? We don't only provide those Sciences Po class, like constitutional law, political science, communication, climate. Of course we do that. There are classes, always with this compass of ethics. Where should I put my ethics when I study big data, metaverse, constitutional law? But there's also all those great political leaders, such as former Obama speechwriter Ben Rhodes, former President François Hollande, Congressman Roukhana from the American Congress, about 30 people who were in power and whose integrity has been questioned by the public. And more important, we are supporting our group with mental health, meditation class, therapists, and a lot of personal development techniques. Because I don't know about you, but the political leaders I want them to be happy and to be rooted in their community and not being disturbed by lack of sleep, alcoholism, or depression. We think that those leaders should be rooted and that they should embody 3 major qualities: ethics, integrity, and empathy, that are the motto of the Academy. And it worked. Like, it's been only 4 months, but we had 5 people on 13 running for elections. And another one that will soon run for mayor is the 4th biggest city of France. I hope we will get some surprise with the nomination of the new government in the coming weeks. And I also hope that in the next 5 years, the Academy will be able to support and train about 100 of those people, all supported by their communities. And that could be in France, but why not beyond? I think that we need to reincarnate the face of politics. Because obviously, political parties, I mean, this is supposed to be their job. But there's less and less and less people joining them. I'm not sure why. I guess because they're lacking resources, but they don't train anymore. They don't provide that anymore. So this is up to us now to change all of this. And I'm sure that in this room, many of you, you have great political solutions. You have hope for your countries. But we are feeling, as I was saying, like, it's not for us. You know, I have this imposter syndrome, especially if I'm a woman, if I'm a person of color, if I have kids, if I'm a baker. Why should it be me? But democracy, and that's the beauty of it, is a process. It's not an outcome. So by entering politics with our strengths, our values, our determination, we are actually healing it. By talking to all instead of the few, we leverage its power. Sana, or Stefan, or Priscilla, they're all part of this country as well. They are representing the beauty and the diversity of it. And I want to believe in them. And I want to ask you to believe in them as well. And actually, I'm not only asking you that, I want you guys to get involved as well. Get involved locally in your community, but get involved into politics. And for those of you who are stakeholders, philanthropic, or donors, I'm also asking you to donate to all those political incubators that are emerging in Europe and in this country. Because too often, when I'm talking to donors, I hear, no, you know, it's political. I'm very scared. I mean, democracy, we should take care of our democracy. You cannot be scared of the word politics. It's not a gros mot, it's not a big word. It's not an insult. There is a beauty in the word democracy. There is a beauty in the word politics. And we need to care for democracy because history has shown us in the past years that if we don't, democracy won't take care of itself alone. We live in France and Europe, the oldest democracies in the world. But those democracies are sick. So I'm asking you to take part in fixing them. And let's get to work. Thank you.
Alice, thank you very much. I want to pull out a quote from what Alice just said. Democracy is not an outcome. It's a process. And I hope, thank you, Alice, for joining us here today. I hope that what you've heard from Alice, from Robyn Scott, right at the top, both of whom were focused on government and politician, how we can get more people into the process there. But also what we heard from Jenny, from Daryna, from Jakub, and from Pierre, how you can be involved in the process through media. Because as we've heard, democracy, process is something that we are all responsible for. And I hope that today here at ChangeNOW, we've given you some ideas and some inspiration to not just help it survive, but to thrive. Thank you so much. Thank you.